Hey everyone, welcome to Infinite Podcast. I'm your host, kicking it off with a heated one, engineering ethics. It's a big deal, folks. I mean, think about that bridge you drove over today or the elevator you took. Engineers are the unsung heroes ensuring all that doesn't collapse on our heads. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of their world where safety isn't just a word, it's a non-negotiable commitment. Buckle up. We're peeling back layers of responsibility like an onion here.
Joe, my man, tell me you haven't just compared engineers to superheroes without the capes. They sure keep our bridges sturdy, but I bet half of them can't even do a single push-up. Gotta appreciate their brain muscles, though, keeping us from falling into the abyss every day. Speaking of scary stuff, remember that time when your backyard swing set collapsed? Bet you wish an engineer checked that out first.
You're going to bring that up, huh? Well, here's a story. So, back in college, I had this roommate, right? Guy was studying engineering. Brilliant mind, could solve equations like no one's business. One day, he's talking about ethics and all that jazz, and suddenly it clicked for me. It's like building a Lego set with a manual. Miss one piece, and the whole thing can go topsy-turvy. That swing set wasn't just fun and games. It was a lesson in paying attention to details, like those engineers do with our safety every day.
You know, Joe, that Lego analogy is cute and all, but let's be real. Playing with Legos and building real stuff. Two totally different playgrounds. I mean, miss a brick on your Millennium Falcon, it's still flying. Miss a bolt on a bridge, not the same happy ending. Still, kudos to your buddy for diving into the ethics sea. Those engineers gotta think like their mom's driving over that bridge every day. Bet that would tighten some screws.
Yeah. So my point is all about the weight of responsibility. Take the Tacoma Narrows Bridge disaster back in '40. That was a classic case where engineers learned the hard way about respecting nature's power. You know, it's like they got to foresee the unforeseeable. Each bolt, beam, and cable isn't just metal, it's trust, public trust. So it's not just about building things, it's about safeguarding lives with every calculation and design choice. And if that doesn't scream high stakes, I don't know what does.
Man, Tacoma Narrows was basically a twisting metal monster from a B movie. Talk about a wake-up call. It's like engineers have to be psychic, predicting the future with their math magic so that whole trust thing doesn't go down the drain.
Let me throw something at you. So I once worked on this local community project, right? We were setting up a small park, nothing fancy. And there was this part where we had to install a playground. Basic stuff, but the guy in charge was obsessed with like double and triple checking every last bolt. And you know what? Someone called him paranoid behind his back. But here's the thing, one day some kids are roughhousing on that very playground. I'm watching, thinking it's going to be mayhem. But nah, it held up like a champ. Turns out our paranoid pal maybe saw a bit into the future, eh? Just goes to show sometimes that extra mile of ethics, it's not overkill, it's a foresight.
Joe, I kind of get the vibe of checking things twice. But don't you think sometimes they go overboard? Like, isn't there a point where we gotta trust the work and let kids be kids? If Mr. Paranoid Engineer is so worried about that playground, maybe he ain't confident in his own math skills, huh? Plus, if it's built right, shouldn't one check be enough? If it's really built right,
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, Simon, but let me paint a picture here. It's like doing a parachute jump. You pack your own chute, right? You trust your work, but man, you're going to check that thing a few times because the stakes are sky high, literally. So, when it comes to engineering, one check might seem solid, but what if there's like a rare flaw in the material or some random outside factor? Sometimes overboard is just the necessary board, you know? Ensuring it's foolproof, even for those high-flying risks.
hold up, Joe. You saying engineers are like those guys packing parachutes? That's wild, man. I mean, I always thought once a playground's up, it's all good to go. But comparing it to skydiving, yeah, I can see why triple checking might not just be paranoia, but actually, super clutch. Because if one rusty bolt lets loose, yikes. It's like suddenly engineering ain't just geeky stuff. It's life or death. Makes you, think twice about crossing a bridge without saying thanks, huh?
Absolutely. And reminds me of this time, like back in the day when I decided to renovate my kitchen. DIY job, you know? I figured, hey, I got tools, I got YouTube, what could go wrong, right? Well, it turns out a lot can go sideways if you don't respect the process. Long story short, I skipped a few steps, those boring safety checks, because who needs that? Just wanted to see that shiny new backsplash in place. Anyway, day one, it's all looking great. Day two, I'm feeling like the king of the world, right up until day three, when I find water everywhere. Yeah, didn't properly seal a pipe because, hey, it looked all right. Man, was that a wake-up call, like when engineers saw the whole Tacoma Narrows thing unfold. It started small, a tiny leak I ignored, but the damage spread fast. So now, every time I pass a construction site or some new tech gets installed somewhere, there's this quiet nod of respect from me, knowing someone checked every detail so we wouldn't have our own mini disaster at home, or worse. Makes those paranoid checks feel less crazy and more essential, huh?
Ah, dude, Joe, renovating your kitchen and trusting your handyman skills? That's like giving a squirrel a job interview. He may look eager, but you know he's just gonna bury the nuts, not count 'em. Next time, just call a plumber, bro, or soon you'll be fishing for breakfast in aisle 5 of Kitchen Lake.
Haha, Simon, you've got a point. But here's my take. It's like anyone can follow instructions. That's easy. The hard part, though, is knowing the why behind every step. You know, those engineers with ethics sharp as knives, they're not just doing tasks. They get the whys, the risks. And sure, we all laugh at the squirrel, right? But if it doesn't store food properly, winter comes along and bam, no more Mr. Squirrel. So translating that to the big engineer stuff, if they just slap things together without understanding the ins and outs, future has a mean punch waiting for us. What I'm saying is, going deep into engineering ethics, respecting that process, it's critical. Not because mistakes can just cause small leaks, but because they can unleash floods in our day-to-day life. That deep dive, it isn't about fear. It's about respect and being realistic about what's at stake. This whole chat really ramps up the appreciation for those in the field who balance between cautious and confident with spot-on ethics. That's gold, man. Absolute gold.
Oh, fearless Joe, walking that tightrope between confidence and catastrophe. You're a braver soul than I am, trying to juggle pipes and potatoes. It's like inviting a bull into a china shop and asking it to tiptoe. Just priceless, man.
Haha, well, you're not wrong. My kitchen saga was a comedy of errors. But it gets you thinking. That line engineers walk, it's razor thin between innovation and disaster. They juggle safety with pushing boundaries every day. So maybe next time we flip a light switch or cross a bridge, we'll remember the ethics behind these marvels. Now, what else about engineering responsibility catches your eye, Simon?
You know, Joe, chatting about that tightrope engineer's walk kind of lands us right into thinking about those times when, sadly, engineering marvels become lessons in textbooks. Like, take the Morandi Bridge incident. Stable one day, gone the next. Makes you wonder how solid ground isn't always as solid as we think, eh?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. The Morandi Bridge, that was a real shocker. Made of concrete and yet just crumbled. It's like we assume these huge structures are eternal, but they're not. The investigation pointed to a failure in maintenance, and here's the kicker. Those cables were slowly deteriorating for years. And look, after that, Italy got serious about checking their infrastructure more rigorously. I mean, it's tragic, but at least now there's this push, so engineers pretty much have to consider every possible scenario. So Simon, what do you think the big lesson is here for, let's say, risk management?
Well, Joe, diving into that Morandi mess kind of yanks out this glaring lesson on risk management, right? It's like engineers and everybody up the line got to stay hawk-eyed, always. Because those cables, man, they were yelling SOS for years, but nobody truly listened until it was too late. So I reckon the real deal is having a plan that's not just a dusty file on a shelf. It's about real checks, real updates, like changing the batteries in your smoke alarm kind of routine. You don't wait for the smoke. You make sure you're ready to catch those warning signs early, so when disaster rings the doorbell, you don't answer with a facepalm. Engineers got a tough gig, constantly solving tomorrow's problems today. But hey, Guess it also shows us regular Joes that slamming the snooze button on maintenance ain't just lazy, it's flat out dangerous.
Now, that's spot on about the alarms, but here's my jab at this. There's a flip side too, right? Maintenance is one beast, but sometimes the system itself is like flawed from day one. Take Chernobyl. That wasn't just a slip up on maintenance. That was a design disaster. They were pushing boundaries without proper safeguards in place. And what's mind-blowing is, post-Chernobyl, there was this global shift in nuclear policy and design. Like suddenly, everyone is wide-eyed, scrambling to revise their safety protocols, because Chernobyl wasn't just a wake-up call. It was an earth-shattering explosion of realization that, man, our tech can turn on us if we're not damn careful with how we engineer it. So Simon, chew on this. Isn't there also something to be said for engineers needing to bake in bulletproof fail-safes right from the draft board? I'm talking ethics in the blueprint, not just as an afterthought when things go sideways.
You know, Joe, when these brainiacs scribble up those blueprints, they've got to sprinkle in some serious what-if seasoning. Because face it, tech without tough love is just a fancy disaster waiting to RSVP yes to the apocalypse ball.
For sure, Simon. Let's ratchet that up a notch with extra context on the what-ifs. All right, looking at something like the Challenger space shuttle disaster, it's not just important, it's critical. Engineers warned about potential O-ring failures in cold weather. They said, hey, this could be bad, but the launch pressed on due to external pressures, right? And then we know the tragic result. All 7 crew members lost because of a seal. It's those minute details, ignored whispers that can scream catastrophe. And what followed was comprehensive overhauls in NASA's decision-making processes and engineering practices. Challenger taught us a tough lesson that every concern needs a spotlight, no matter how small, and risk management isn't a part-time gig, it's an all-in, full-contact sport. Ethical engineering isn't just double checks, it's also about making hard calls based on what's safe, not what's scheduled.
Yeah, exactly, Joe. Digging deeper into that O-ring ordeal, it's crucial to note how communication breakdown really ties into disaster. Like engineers spoke up, but were they heard? Not loud enough, man. Challenger is this brutal reminder that you can't play hot potato with safety concerns. That crucial info has got to flow up, down, and all around crystal clear. And see what shook out after NASA goes full throttle on revamping how decisions get made. It's not just about having the data, it's about putting your foot down when the data screams no-go. Got to push against the pressure to launch when signs say buckle up, danger ahead. The point is listening to the quiet guy in the back, to the numbers, to the nagging doubts. It's not optional. It's like Ethics 101 got a turbo boost because legit lives are on the line. And those hard calls, man, they define whether ethics in engineering are worth their salt or if they're just pretty words in a textbook. Real talk right there.
Well, here's the rub, Simon. That communication breakdown is like a band where the drummer's off beat. The whole rhythm gets thrown and disaster strikes. It's not enough to just have protocols. There has to be a culture that nurtures, speaking up. And look, after these tragedies, you see this ripple effect. Now we've got more robust peer reviews, safety-first cultures, and engineers with the clout to say hold up without fear of being sidelined. These cases, they're tragic bookmarks in history, sure. But I'm betting they also inspire the next gen to fuse ethics into technology like they're two sides of the same coin. They teach us that progress isn't just about charging ahead. It's about pausing to make sure no one's left crossing fingers behind their back as we leap forward. That accountability and transparency? Non-negotiable, man. Full stop.
Right on, Joe. It's like we're cooking up the future, and if we aren't careful, instead of a gourmet meal, we end up with food poisoning. And trust me, nobody wants that, especially when it's served with a side of, oops, my bad.
This chat brings me back to a time when I was working on my first car. It was an old '78 Camaro. Now, let me paint the picture. I had the manual, and I had every tool you could imagine laid out all nice and neat. It was all about tuning that engine to perfection. I'm talking dreams of that baby roaring to life. But here's the crunch. I skipped the simple step of thoroughly checking the ignition system. Figured it was all plug and play, like how difficult could it be, right? Well, twist of fate. Not only did the car not start, but when it finally did, a minor electrical mishap led to a small fire under the hood. Now, no major harm done aside from my bruised ego and some singed wires. But, man, it drove home the reality that even with the best intentions, overlooking the simplest checks can lead to quite the unintended barbecue. And that's kind of like our chat here. The details, they matter every single time because the consequences are real, not just for pride, but, in engineering ethics, for lives.
So you're saying, Joe, like with your Camaro, dude, that's wild. It just takes one missed step and boom, backyard bonfire. And I guess it's like those engineering fails we talked about, right? We can have all the fancy tools in the world, but mess up the basics and you're lighting a match on a powder keg. It's kind of funny in a twisted way, thinking our slick plans go up in smoke because of something small we overlooked. But with engineering, dude, it's another level. Those tiny mishaps aren't just oopsies, they're full-blown tragedies. So yeah, these failures shout out a lesson loud and clear. Don't skip steps. Because man, every step is there for a reason. It's about keeping us all safe from, those big fiery surprise parties no one wants an invite to.
Totally, Simon. But let me throw a wrench into the works here. It's easy to backseat drive after everything's gone south, right? We pore over these disaster case studies with the luxury of hindsight, combing through ruins for what-ifs and should-haves. But let's not forget the context. The pressure cooker environments where engineers are often pushed to cut corners or fast-track stuff to meet deadlines or budgets. Now, that ain't an excuse. Safety is safety, period. But it does kind of shine a light on why those small details sometimes slip through the cracks. So I'm thinking, rather than just learning from past fails, we got to really dig into creating environments where ethics aren't just lip service. Ensure learning goes beyond the textbooks directly into the day-to-day grind. It's about cultivating an ethos where every signal is treated like, potential smoke before fire. That means empowering folks on the ground to pump the brakes when danger signs flash, even if it's unpopular or inconvenient at the moment. How do you see this playing out in the real world, Simon? Can we engineer a culture shift? Or are we stuck on repeat until something big reshapes our thinking again?
Joe, if you're not shaking the tree to see what falls out, you're just gathering the same old nuts. Let's spice it up and say we've got to be the change. Mixmaster engineers turning the beat up on safety till everyone's dancing to the same tune.
It reminds me of a story I once heard about this local fire department. They were like super proactive, always drilling, always preparing. But one day they get this routine call, something they've done 100 times, a small kitchen fire. So they roll out, same as always, but this time someone missed checking the water level in the tank. Now they arrive on scene, ready to do what they do best, and that's when they notice no water to fight the fire. That little checklist item, which usually is just a formality, suddenly becomes this huge deal. And here's the thing, that slip-up caused damage that shouldn't have happened. It was preventable, completely avoidable. So like our conversations about engineering disasters, it drives home this point. The routine may seem mundane, but, it's all there for a reason. Every step we skip, no matter how small, can lead to consequences that are, disproportionately big. And we need to ingrain that kind of discipline you see at fire departments into every aspect, especially in high-stake areas like engineering. It's not glamorous by any means, but man, does it matter.
Man, Joe, makes you think if firefighters had a motto, it'd probably be something like, it's the little things that stop you from getting burned. But hey, they also say routine is the nemesis of innovation. Find me the balance on that teeter-totter.
Simon, diving deep into the gravity of these engineering ethics can get pretty heavy. Let's pivot a bit and lighten the mood. I mean, not every design flub ends in catastrophe. Sometimes you just end up with a good story or even an accidental masterpiece. Take this one architect, thought he was crafting this avant-garde water fountain, right? Turns out his calculations were, let's say, optimistic. First time they turn it on, instead of this majestic cascade, the wind catches it and bam, It's raining sideways. People are getting soaked, running for cover like it's Armageddon. But here's the kicker. It becomes this total hit. Locals start calling it the surprise shower, and tourists eat it up. You've got folk coming round with swim gear to snap a pic mid-spritz. What started as a facepalm moment turns into this beloved city quirk. And that's the charm sometimes, isn't it? When those oops moments get embraced by the community. They transform something that didn't hit the mark into a public art piece or unexpected amusement feature. Got any tales from your side, Simon, where a design fail ended up being a crowd pleaser?
Oh, Joe, you bet. So there was this skyscraper downtown that had a funky mirror finish, right? The designers were probably going all out for cheek, but the sun hitting it just so turned it into this giant laser beam, frying everything in sight, a real-life death ray. But get this, locals started cracking jokes, nicknaming it the fry scraper. Instead of getting mad, food trucks popped up serving solar-grilled sandwiches. Talk about lemonade from lemons, right? It's like these flops are secret sauce for community spirit or something. Turn a design faceplant into a collective inside joke. It's pretty great when folks don't just roll with the punches, but start hosting boxing classes with them.
Ha, fry scraper. That's golden. It's funny how these fails become iconic. That building's now probably more famous for its accidental cookout vibes than the actual architecture. There's magic in the mishaps. They serve up a side of humor we didn't know we ordered, becoming part of a city's charm. It just goes to show that sometimes the best stories are the ones you never intended to write.
Totally, and it's wild how these quirky landmarks get folk to show up in droves just to see the blunder wonder. Guess it's true. Some architects design buildings, others create folklore.
Absolutely, Simon. Speaking of architectural quirks becoming folklore, look at the Leaning Tower of Pisa. That's a structural fail turned historic marvel. It's been leaning since the 12th century because of poor foundation work, and now it's iconic. And get this, over in England, there's the walkie-talkie building in London that had its own fry scraper moment. Its concave design created a solar glare so intense it melted parts of cars. They had to rig a sunshade to deflect the death ray. Or how about Milwaukee's addition to the art scene? The Quadroxy Pavilion's Burke Brise Soleil wing-like structure was meant to open and shut, but malfunctioned during its debut. Instead of outrage, it became an event people came to see if today would be the day it'd finally move. We've got engineering missteps turning into tourism tickets worldwide. It goes to show, our human errors sometimes accidentally fashion these cultural badges of hilarity and endearment.
Oh yeah, the walkie-talkie. That's like the bat signal for missteps turned superpowers. Reminds me of this time. Get this, I bought a super cheap tent for a camping trip, right? Thrifty Simon. They called me, pitched it up all proud, but when night fell, the thing was like a sieve under some drizzle. Instead of a soggy disaster, we all end up sharing a hearty laugh and, tense, with new friends at the site. There I was, hoping to be one with nature, and nature's like, nah, let's get social. Ends up being one of the best trips ever, just not in the survivalist way I'd pictured. You squint at the silver lining in these goofy blunders, and bam, you find a whole other picture. It's like life's misprints are, collectibles in the grand scavenger hunt, huh? Sometimes what's leaning or too shiny teaches us to lean into the moment before life hands you an accidental sunshade.
Right, Simon? It's those happy accidents like your tent story there that stick with you the most. Not quite what you planned, but maybe what you needed to make a memory. It's like life doesn't always give us what we ask for in the way we expect it. Those fails, they're inconveniences, sure, but they've got this sneaky way of tossing us into unexpected adventures or new friendships even. We get stories we just couldn't make up if we tried. Genuine moments that kind of, I don't know, sprinkle some personality onto our experiences. And when design blunders turn into community legends, that's when you realize the imperfections aren't just flaws. They're the very things that give a place its unique flavor.
Man, Joe, it's like the universe has this odd sense of humor, slapping a wonky hat on our serious plans, and suddenly it's the town mascot. Go figure.
Speaking of the universe's sense of humor, Simon, let's flip the script from history to future. where technology is tossing us those wonky hats with a digital twist. With AI coming into play, design modeling, smart infrastructure, we're looking at an ethical playground that's getting real complex. Say you've got AI running a building's safety systems. On paper, seems foolproof, optimized responses, precision calculations, but toss in a pinch of, ethical decision-making? Suddenly, it's not just about numbers, it's life or death, and the AI's got to choose in a snap. Now you've handed the hat over, allowing tech to make calls on human safety. It's like opening Pandora's box. We could be dodging our skyscraper mishaps, sure, but then we're staring down questions like, who's accountable when AI messes up? Simon, how do you feel about machines making choices that could write tomorrow's headlines today?
Here's the thing, Joe, machines don't sweat. They don't do Monday blues or get dazzled by a shiny new gadget. Efficiency? Sure, they've got that down pat. But ethics? That's human turf, right? When a machine makes a safety call, who's it playing chess with, really? You can't program empathy or gut feelings into lines of code. What if AI decides saving the shiny new sports car over the beat-up family van is the way to go? And accountability, that's kicking the can down a very complicated road. We set up AI as this infallible whiz kid until it messes up. Then suddenly, it's hot potato city trying to figure out who gets the blame pie. Gotta say, Joe, letting tech steer the ship through ethical waters feels like trading the captain for cruise control. It's useful, but I wouldn't want to bunk with it during a storm, you know?
True, Simon. Relying solely on tech for moral calls? That's like asking your GPS to pick your favorite ice cream flavor. Might lead you to the parlor, but it can't savor the taste.
You know, Joe, that kind of reminds me of when I was a kid. I had this old school Tamagotchi, those little digital pets, obsessed with it, right? But like one day, I tried to hack it so it could, auto care for itself while I was busy with a important kid business or whatever. Would have been genius, except it didn't quite grasp the nurturing part. Got home and found my pixel buddy in a world of trouble. My little experiment in outsourcing care, a bust, taught me something though. Sometimes you can't let tech run the whole show, because, well, some things need a human touch, just like with AI stuff today. You need that warmth, that understanding. That's not just ones and zeros, you know?
Spot on, Simon. That Tamagotchi story, classic example of early life lessons in automation versus the human element. Fast forward to today's emerging tech scene, and that dichotomy's just exploded. You've got deep learning, neural networks underpinning this AI revolution. These systems can trawl through data at breakneck speeds, making them valuable for identifying patterns, enhancing efficiency, and predicting outcomes based on vast sets of parameters, and they're evolving. In structural design, AI is used for simulations, testing variables we'd take ages to compute manually. But here's where it gets sticky. Figuring out the ethical framework for autonomous decision-making isn't like coding a standard safety protocol. When you've got AI involved in real-time scenarios with high stakes, like managing traffic flow on smart motorways or controlling building evacuations during emergencies, the margin for error narrows sharply. It raises hefty questions about responsibility, as you said. Do we blame the programmer, the algorithm, the company? There's no clear-cut answer. Plus, there are privacy concerns, cybersecurity risks, heck, even socio-political aspects when you consider the global race for superior AI tech. Bottom line, incorporating AI requires not just tech upgrades, but an elaborate ethical blueprint, one that doesn't exist yet. We're playing catch-up with our own creations, figuring out the ramifications after the fact, often once those Tamagotchi-like hiccups surface. The fusion of technological capability and moral responsibility is today's real innovation frontier.
Ha! Figuring out AI ethics. It's like trying to teach a robot to love. Good luck with that seminar, am I right?
Right? Might as well hold a dance-off between calculators. But hey, imagine if we could crack that code. Robots writing poetry, or better yet, hosting podcasts. Now there's a future episode for us, Simon. Robo Joe and Cyborg Simon. Who needs human quirks when you've got digital drama?
So, this one time, right, I got myself one of those fancy smart fridges. You know, the kind that's supposed to catalog your grub and, tell you when you're out of milk? It was perfect, until it wasn't. I'm throwing a big shindig for friends. I've got recipes ready, mood set, but old smarty fridge goes rogue, orders 5 gallons of milk and no cheese. Now, I love a good dairy fest as much as anyone, but come on, it's silly, but it shows how letting tech take the wheel can kind of lead us down these weird roads. And we might chuckle at my unintentional milk party, but when the stakes are high, like with AI in design or safety, that same glitch isn't going to be so funny. It sort of underlines the whole who's in charge question. A fridge mess up is one thing, an architectural goof quite another, huh?
Yeah, haha, those smart fridges. They're like a sneak peek into that not-so-smooth future where tech takes over the small stuff. First, it's ordering milk by the gallon. Next thing you know, we've got AI whispering to self-driving cars or deciding whether your house should brace for a storm or just wing it. And that's fine and dandy when we're talking about snacks. Worst case, you throw an impromptu milkshake bash. But scale that up to infrastructure and safety systems? Whoa, buddy, we're playing in a whole new league. Think about it. You've got algorithms designed to optimize traffic flow. Super cool until one bugs out, slams the brakes on the freeway, and sets off a ghastly tango of bumper cars. Or how about AI-monitored building evac plans that work perfectly, except for when they lock down the wrong section because someone forgot to carry the one in an algorithm somewhere. So while it's comedy gold pondering these digital domestics gone haywire today, down the line with higher stakes, any missteps aren't going to have us chuckling into our cereal. The milk mishaps serve as lighthearted warnings. We need humans at the helm, especially when it comes to interpreting shades of moral gray, places where AI sees only black and white. The tech tide is here like it or not, but surfing it safely, that's the real trick. We want our advances without wiping out on the ethical undertow. It's not just plug and play. We're treading deep techno-moral waters. How do we tool up, policy-wise, prep-wise, so tomorrow's smart city doesn't turn into yesterday's fridge fiasco? That's a story we'd better author with care, or be ready for a dairy doozy on a grander scale.
You say bug out. I picture an AI overlord sending traffic into a cha-cha slide. Up next, Siri's gonna start giving life advice, and I'll be binge-watching my toaster. Buckle up.
Cha-cha slide aside, Simon. Imagine a building grooving with the gale instead of buckling under it. That's resilience.
No way. Like a building dancing in a hurricane. That's wild. I've never heard of anything like that. How does that even work?
Yeah, wild is right. So, what we're seeing now is architects and engineers, they're getting seriously creative. Instead of the old mindset, making buildings as rigid as possible, they're designing them to actually move with the forces of nature. We've got structures on shock absorbers for earthquakes and skyscrapers with reinforced cores that can sway safely in high winds, right? And there are new materials coming into play, cool stuff that's super strong but also a bit giving, so it doesn't just snap. For example, take this real case from Japan, a country well-versed in shaking things up earthquake-wise. They've engineered some buildings with deep foundations connected to massive shock absorbers or dampers. When the earth gets groovy, these buildings sort of shimmy in response, riding out the quake. It's tech stepping up to say, chill, I got this. Or after Hurricane Sandy, there were houses built on stilts, designed specifically to withstand floods and high winds. Those homes fared way better than their traditional ground-hugging neighbors when the water came knocking. It's practically performance art with a side of genius engineering. Strategies like these not only protect people and property, but also potentially lower insurance costs and rebuild times. That's pretty slick if you ask me.
Yeah, performance art with a punch. Saving lives and money, that's like the ultimate win-win. Clever stuff.
Exactly. Here's some nitty-gritty for you. It's all about that shift from traditional building approaches to what we call resilient architecture. The core idea is designing buildings with the ability to absorb, recover, and even thrive amidst catastrophic events. So there are materials like cross-laminated timber, CLT, super strong yet flexible, making it great for quake zones. Then concrete. Now we've got variants mixed with polymers, which give it a bit more bend while retaining that brute strength. Not your granddad's concrete for sure. Another innovation is baselation tech. Essentially, Buildings are set on isolators that decouple them from ground movement during a tremor. The Taipei 101 Tower in Taiwan uses a massive tuned mass damper, a giant pendulum, to counteract swaying caused by high winds or quakes. Closer to sea level, after Hurricane Katrina wrecked New Orleans, architects rebounded with raised homes and floating foundations that rise with floodwater, like a houseboat but cooler. These aren't your everyday drywall patch-ups. This is high-tech gear repurposing nature's punches into a dojo-style soft block. And guess what? It works wonders when Mother Nature goes full MMA. Real-world proof? Check out Japan's skyscrapers standing tall post-quakes. Or those resilient homes in New Orleans, Lower Ninth Ward, living large over flood threats. They're not just surviving, they're throwing down the gauntlet for every architect and city planner to step up their disaster game.
Right, like turning doomsday into DIY day. These buildings are saying, bring it on, nature, then tossing us the keys to ride out the storm in style.
Yeah, I get you on the bring it on attitude. But hold up, Simon. It's not all sunshine and rainbows here, right? We still got to face the music when it comes to outdated infrastructure that, like, honestly, it can barely stand against a stiff breeze, let alone a full-blown natural disaster. Take, for instance, the classic American wood-framed houses. Charming? Sure. But when those high-speed winds from hurricanes or tornadoes hit, these places can end up like, matchsticks all over the place. And then standard brick and mortar, solid, yeah, but it doesn't flex, so in an earthquake, you're kind of out of luck. And like retrofitting, talk about costly. Not every city's rolling in dough ready to pour it into next-gen tech. Plus the aesthetics, some folks push back because they want neighborhoods with a certain look, not something out of a sci-fi flick. So yeah, DIY resilience is cool. We definitely want buildings that tell disasters to take a hike. But getting everyone on board, from homeowners to tight-fisted budget committees, now that's a whole different monster. The question ain't just how we build against the storm, but also who's going to foot the bill for those storm-proof dance moves. And let's be real, the answers aren't blowing in the wind. They're caught up in a tug-of-war between innovation, practicality, and good old-fashioned greenbacks.
And let's not forget about the battle royale between nature and concrete. I'm all for beast mode buildings, but when a squirrel's got a jet ski to find nuts, we might have gone too far.
Ha, Simon. You're spot on there, man. It's like we've been playing SimCity with Earth, maxing out the concrete jungle expansion pack without reading the fine print. Now every once in a while, nature's sending a reminder who's really in charge, and it ain't the guy with the corner office. We gotta strike that balance, keep our feet on the ground while our heads are in the clouds thinking about these megastructures. I mean, it's rad to see tech and architecture doing the tango, but not at the expense of turning our backyards into Waterworld. It's all about respect, right? Innovate, but keep it tight with the environment, because when squirrels need jet skis, it's past time to check ourselves. We're part of this ecosystem, not above it, not beyond it. Remember that, and maybe we'll figure out how to build smarter, not just sturdier.
Maybe the squirrels will start building their own little hurricane-proof tree houses next.
Don't count 'em out, Simon. Squirrels are savvy little critters, Give 'em a hard hat and a blueprint, and they'll probably start setting up their own critter construction company, specializing in acorn-shaped bunkers that can weather the storm. But jokes aside, these convoys of creatures might actually teach us a thing or two about adapting to our surroundings instead of forcing them to adapt to us. Nature's been at this game way longer than we have when it comes to resilience. Maybe instead of always building against the storm, we should take a few notes on how to bend with it, just like those tree branch tightrope walkers we call squirrels.
Okay. Bending with the storm sounds poetic and all, but let's be real. Humans aren't exactly built to hunker down in a burrow or ride out a flood on a log. We've got cities and infrastructure to think about here. So, I'm thinking maybe there's a middle ground. We don't gotta go full squirrel, but we shouldn't be steamrolling Mother Nature either. And hey, old Mother N, she's got some tricks we can borrow. Like termite mounds with their natural cooling systems. We could rip that off for energy-efficient building designs, right? Adapting ain't just copying paste, it's like remixing nature's hits into our own human jam session. So yeah, build strong stuff, throw in some swaying skyscrapers, shock absorbers, and sure, why not? Some acorn-shaped bunkers for kicks. It's about taking the best bits of beast mode engineering and tweaking them to work for us, minus the fur and tails.
You've got a solid point there, Simon. We're not backing down from the challenge. It's about like smart adaptation, taking cues from nature without going full Tarzan, you know? Like termite mounds, they're genius, man. Their natural ventilation, that's eco-engineering at its finest. We take that, spin it into building design, bam! We're talking energy savings and some serious Mother Nature street cred. And yeah, while we can't all curl up in burrows, we can look at how burrows are made, why they work so well, and apply those principles to strengthen our own homes against whatever nature throws at us. It's a bit of give and take with the environment, finding that sweet spot where innovation meets ancient wisdom. So, long story short, no need for whiskers and a fluffy tail. We just got to be a little more squirrel-like in thought, less bulldozer in action. Let's remix nature's playbook. Turn those pages into blueprints for cities that don't just survive, they thrive amidst the storm.
Imagine the wildlife kicking back, watching us finally learn their tricks. Those squirrels are probably thinking, "Welcome to the party, humans. Grab a hard hat."
So, funny story. I've got this buddy who's into building fancy birdhouses, right? It's like a hobby turned semi-pro gig. The guy's obsessed with making them durable and stylish. But the real twist is how he watches local birds for inspiration. There was, one time, he saw sparrows nesting under bridge eaves to avoid storms and thought, why not design a birdhouse that kind of mimics that natural shelter? So he starts crafting these overhangs on his birdhouses, giving them serious curb appeal plus weather protection. Turns out those houses became crazy popular, especially in areas with a lot of rain or where, gusty winds are common. His little side hustle took off because he paid attention to nature's cues. Kinda cool. And it's got me thinking about how we look at our own homes and structures, Maybe we should get back to basics, observe more, and see how marrying those simple, natural solutions with our monstrous human tech could probably work miracles. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just add some squirrely-style spin to it, if you catch my drift.
You know, Joe, when that other Joe, your birdhouse building buddy, taps into nature's smarts, he's onto something. Makes you think, if a little wooden house can blend style and substance, surviving in stormy weather, what's stopping our big concrete jungles from doing the same? Let's chew on that before we dive into the next whirlwind of ideas.
Good chew, Simon. Thinking of style meets substance, let's cruise into how those classic aesthetics from all over the globe have been facing off with Mother Nature for centuries. It's wild how these ancient designs stick around, right? We've got these old school builds that shrugged off what the weather dished out without crumbling. I'm talking igloos staying cool, warm, in polar blowouts, and desert adobe houses keeping their chill during scorcher seasons. And now our modern brainiacs are eyeballing these time-tested tricks, folding them into up-to-the-minute disaster-proof projects. It's this slick mashup of history homework and hard hats, like traditional thatched roofs inspiring eco-friendly materials in new builds, or bamboo making a comeback because it bends but doesn't break in a quake. This ain't just copy-pasting the past, it's heritage going high-tech, bridging gaps between keeping things looking authentic and making sure they don't fold like a cheap umbrella when nature crashes the party.
Yeah, but let's pump the brakes for a sec, Joe. I mean, it's one thing to nod to the old ways, like saying cool hat to a cowboy, but slapping on a straw roof doesn't make your McMansion a dojo of Zen resilience. Cracking the cultural code ain't about turning back time with architecture cosplay. The big brain move is to sift out those ancient secrets and give them a 21st century twist, Like those igloos. That's not just stacking snow bricks. There's genius insulation science chillin' right there. Heritage high technology, sure. But keeping it real is key. We don't want history buffs getting their knickers in a twist because someone goo-goo-gaga'd their ancestors' blueprints. It's like walking a tightrope over a canyon full of critics, trying to balance that sweet style with legit safety gear.
Ha, architecture cosplay. Spot on, Simon. It's one heck of a tightrope, but maybe the answer is staring us down from atop the Great Wall or whispering through bamboo groves. Gonna need to dial in more than just aesthetics. It's about capturing that ancestral wisdom without turning it into a theme park attraction.
So, Joe, like, what's the deal with making sure new structures pull off this balancing act? How do we bake in that wisdom without turning tradition into a museum piece?
Well, Simon, it's about respecting the roots while you keep growing, right? Discerning what made those old builds tough. Think about vernacular architecture, structures designed using local materials and knowledge that inherently withstand regional challenges. So start with like the dry stone technique from ancient times. No mortar used, just ironclad stacking skills. They've got these giant retaining walls in Italy's wine country holding back hills for centuries. That art of interlocking stones can teach us a whole lot about gravity walls and erosion control in modern civic engineering. Or take the Malay houses on stilts built above floodplains in Southeast Asia. They knew floods were as certain as taxes, so hey ho, off the ground we go. To avoid that museum vibe, architects got to understand the essence of these techniques and then innovate, marrying advanced materials like geopolymer concrete. That stuff's tougher and more sustainable than your granddad's mix, and better design tools like digital modeling systems help refine those ancestral concepts to shut out the worst weather tantrums of today. Finally, getting community buy-in means keeping them cozy with the familiar while wowing them with new tech resilience. It's not easy, but when you nail it, you've got living spaces that are both functional homages and plain hardcore when it comes to taking on what nature dishes out.
Okay, Joe, those stilt houses are slick. Yeah, but let's not get all dreamy-eyed. Plopping modern homes on poles might dodge a flood, but it ain't a silver bullet. And about heavy-duty rocks in Italy, that's cool, but transplant that thinking to an earthquake zone, and you've got a rumbling mess without some serious tech backup. You following me? Then there's this geopolymer concrete stuff. Sure, it's the hulk of building materials, but what's the price tag on that? Not everyone's got billionaire pockets. Plus, the community part. Let's face it, people cherish their traditions like grandma's apple pie recipe. Go changing up the flavor too much with fancy future talk, and you might leave them with a bad taste. Nitpicking aside, Joe, you've got some solid ideas. Architects gotta be half historian, half psychic, preserving the past while predicting next year's weather report. But they also need to be bargain hunters, scouring both history and science for deals on how best to keep our roofs over our heads without selling a kidney. Sure, it's tricky business marrying old world charm with new age muscle, but do it right, and maybe we'll have homes that'll make both the ancestors and tomorrow's kids proud.
Heh, Simon, tell me about it. The real trick is playing matchmaker between tradition and innovation without breaking anyone's heart or their bank. That's some high-stakes house hunting for you.
Right? It's like setting up a blind date between a Viking and a robot.
Bang on. They might have a spark. Picture it, Vikings meet AI. Talk about a culture meets tech mashup. Could just work, or could go full berserker mode. Worth grabbing popcorn for either way.
Oh man, this one time, I was on vacation down in Mexico, right? Gorgeous place. The colors, the food. But the thing that got me were these super old Mayan ruins. These builders, they were like the original eco-architects. So I'm wandering around, and there's this local guy who tells me all about how the Mayans designed their cities with the stars, and positioned buildings for airflow to beat the jungle heat. It's wild because it's so smart, but also like really simple. Flash forward, and I'm back home, dealing with AC on the fritz in the middle of summer, sweating buckets and thinking about those Mayans. Like, maybe we're overcomplicating stuff with our fancy tech. Might be we just need to look back a little to move forward. Those ancient cats knew a thing or two about staying cool without an electricity bill that hits you like a heavyweight punch.
Yeah, and those Mayan cats really had their stuff together. No argument there. But let's not get all misty-eyed about ancient tech without peering through our 21st century lenses, right? All right, here's the rub. When you're chilling under a starry bliss in Mayaville, it's easy to knock our AC dependency. But try selling sweatbox summers to folks today, when streaming from a cool living room is like a basic human right. So while we're looking back for wisdom, which, don't get me wrong, I'm all about, we've got to stay grounded in the now. Take those airflow principles, brilliant on their own, and see how they scale in a mega metropolis. There's the trick, making those breezy Mayan vibes mesh with our plugged-in lives. Ancient know-how meets smart homes. That's where we should be aiming. Weirdly enough, it's sort of forging this silent convo between the old builders and the new guard, one that's got to say more than just, nice arches. It's about translating those whispers from the past into straight-talk solutions for tomorrow. Less overcomplicating, more recalibrating. You feel me?
Totally, Joe. The challenge is definitely in not just whispering sweet nothings at those old arches, but striking up a full-on dialogue, turning a flirty look back into a deep bond with the here and now. Makes you wonder, what's the next chapter in this love story between tradition and tech, right?
Haha, speaking of dialogue, Simon, ever hear about those wacky constructor fails? Like that shake it off structure technique, basically the earthquake dance-off strategy? It'd be a hoot to picture a contractor's pitch on that one.
Okay, so like picture this. You walk into a pitch meeting, and there's this confident dude at the front. He clears his throat, right? Folks, ever seen a salsa dancing skyscraper? And everyone's kind of looking around like, what? He clicks on this PowerPoint, all dramatic like, and there's just this big old building with hips, I swear, hips, shimmying away from danger, like it's on Dancing with the Structural Stars or something. So I'm sitting there thinking, what happens when the music stops, man? Does the whole thing just topple like a Jenga tower at a frat party? But how about those listeners, Joe? Any of them got a funny bone for architecture fails? We got to hear those stories.
Ha, Simon, you ain't wrong. It's all fun and games until the music stops, right? But hear me out. Those gyrating towers could be onto something. What if that idea got a techie upgrade? Like throw in some self-balancing tech so when things get shaky, the building just moonwalks its way out of trouble. And as for our listeners, and boy do they have imaginations, the weirder the better. I'm picturing submissions like buildings shaped like giant springs, ready to boing their way above any quake. Or imagine a high rise with legs, literally walking away from danger. But for real, apart from the chuckles, this stuff gets us thinking outside the box, or the cube if we're talking about conventional builds. So yeah, let's broadcast that invitation. Folks, sketch up your funkiest, safest building concept, bonus points if it looks straight out of a Saturday morning cartoon. Send them our way, and let's riff on this concept, because sometimes the best ideas come wrapped in a good laugh, am I right?
Yeah, walking buildings. I mean, the visual alone is cracking me up, Joe, but let's flip it for a sec. These walkie-talkie towers, like how fast are they booking it away from an earthquake? And yo, imagine the morning commute with that added chaos. It's a riot to think about. But on the real C side of things, when we daydream up these cartoon fixes, we're kind of poking fun at the fact that we haven't totally nailed down this whole safety dance with Mother Nature, you know? Like, okay, what if buildings really did have springs for foundations? I'm picturing someone's coffee just perpetually sloshing over the rim every tremor, because your house decides to take a bouncy castle approach to earthquakes. So, while our listeners are busting out their crayons and sketch pads, hey, maybe one of them will accidentally stumble on the next big thing in disaster proofing. Stranger stuff has happened. I mean, wasn't the Slinky supposed to be some industrial gizmo before it tumbled down into toy fame? Let's keep those gears turning and the laughs flowing. Hit us with your best shot, guys. Doodle us up some safe as houses hilarity. Who knows? Amidst the gags, might just be a gem waiting to be polished.
Hey listeners, stick around for our take on how movies get futurism hilariously wrong or eerily right. Ever noticed how some of those sci-fi skyscrapers look exactly like the blender on your kitchen counter?
Oh, totally, Joe. It's like snack time in the Jetsons' kitchen, somehow turned into our high-rise blueprint of tomorrow. You gotta wonder if the future is just gonna be a series of kitchen appliance mishaps.
Haha, sure Simon. Now, shifting from kitchen blenders to something a bit meatier, let's chop it up about the morality stewing in urban planning. Like, should we prioritize suburban sprawl or cradle those dense city centers when doling out disaster safety dollars? Tough call, ain't it?
Yeah, Joe, that's like picking your favorite pizza topping at a vegan joint. Tricky, man. I mean, the burbs got families and stuff, but those city centers are jam-packed with people living shoulder to shoulder. Hang on. So here's the rub. We're playing favorites with humans based on zip codes. That ain't sitting right with me. You can't just toss disaster safety around like freebie coupons, right? And about the architects and engineers, dude, it's like they gotta juggle burning coals of public good and private interest without dropping them on everyone's laps. It's not just drawing straight lines, their pencils are kinda writing moral codes too. Then there's this whole cost versus life thing. Someone's putting price tags on neighborhoods now. Come on, how does one even start to justify gambling with lives for a few bucks saved? We should be getting all hands on deck to spread that disaster safety love far and wide, like peanut butter, smooth and equal. Maybe the slice of the budget pie needs rethinking, you know? Bake a bigger pie, perhaps?
Simon, you're preaching to the choir. I feel ya. It's like a gut punch thinking about someone rationing out survival chances based on budgets. Man, those choices aren't just spreadsheets and contract fine print. They're about real people locked into life's lottery, hoping they pick the right neighborhood. This responsibility, we're talking about lives in the hands of the folks drafting blueprints, is heavy. Engineers crafting safety isn't just smart design. It's like ethical architecture in concrete form. And yeah, weighing human life against cost, it's messed up. It gets me, why are we scrimping on this? We've got to value every community, invest across the board, like nobody's expendable when Mother Nature rolls the dice. Tweaking budgets, improving designs, it's vital. Everyone deserves that shield from disaster, no matter where they lay their heads at night. It's not just fair, it's fundamentally right. And something's got to give to make that the norm.
Right? It's a human puzzle, Joe. Billion-dollar bridges next to neighborhoods that can't weather a storm. Makes you wonder if we threw the manual out the window and started fresh. What kind of city would we build then, huh?
Starting fresh, the ideal city would likely embrace resilience and sustainability from the ground up. There are actually living examples we can draw from, like Singapore's emphasis on green buildings, blending nature into urban spaces, or Japan's strict seismic codes post-Kobe earthquake in 1995. Investment in infrastructure isn't just about spending money, but saving future costs and lives. The National Institute of Building Sciences notes that for every dollar spent on hazard mitigation, we save 6 in disaster recovery. And speaking of equitable distribution of resources, policies like those enacted by countries adhering to the Sendai Framework, a UN initiative, aim to reduce disaster risk for everyone, especially emphasizing the protection of the most vulnerable populations. From an engineering perspective, newer developments in building materials, like self-healing concrete and shake-absorbing base isolators, are revolutionizing how structures respond to force, providing broader options for safety regardless of budget constraints. There's a philosophical and practical mandate to weave these practices into the fabric of urban planning. It's about valuing human life at every level, ensuring that regardless of where someone lives, their community is built to last with every innovative and thoughtful tool we've got in our kit.
Radical idea, Joe. What if this philosophy wasn't just for new cities? Imagine retrofitting the old with the future's toolkit. Classic meets cutting edge. That's the dream, isn't it? A safe spot for everyone, where the past doesn't have to bow out for progress.
Retrofitting's a dream, all right, Simon, but it rubs up against reality. I mean, take Charleston or San Francisco, old school charm, but man, they're not exactly on speaking terms with the whole futuristic safety gig. We gotta ask, is retrofitting just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound? Like it feels good, but does it really fix the underlying problem? It's one thing to patch up a building here and there. It's another to overhaul an entire city's guts. And speaking of old versus new, there's this push-pull, right? You're looking at history in those brick walls, stories in the streets, Pretty hard to get folks to say, yeah, let's drill in there and shake things up. But then the flip side, don't we owe it to those thinking citizens strolling those sidewalks to give them a safe stage to play out their lives? Preserving the past, sure, but not at the cost of living safely in the present, or heck, even having a future. It's like trying to run the latest software on a vintage computer sometimes. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, the goal's noble, the dream's vivid, but boots on the ground, it's a gnarly tangle of red tape, dollar signs, and sentimental value that could use a hardcore strategy session.
Sometimes I wonder, Joe, if a city's soul might be worth the risk. Now that's a can of worms. But hey, if your house had personality, you'd want to argue with it too, right?
That's one heck of a can, Simon. It's like, cities have characters, stories etched into every corner. Tearing that down for what's practical. It's kind of like editing the main character out of your favorite book. But let's strip it back for a sec. You gotta wonder, when's charm too costly? And it begs the question, who gets to decide if soul wins over safety? I mean, isn't it kind of our duty to keep the story going rather than preserving its dusty jacket? And about arguing with a house, if mine grumbled every time I skipped maintenance, could be a good thing, right? Poke me into fixing stuff before it comes crashing down. What do you think, Simon? Should we be getting cozy chats from our chimneys and drafts through the door frames telling us to patch things up?
For sure, Joe. Duty to the present versus honor to the past. It's no easy showdown. If the walls could talk, maybe they'd tell us to write new chapters rather than just cling to their covers. It's about balancing the books, literally and metaphorically. What say the listeners chime in on this?
Speaking of writing new chapters, Simon, transitioning from the whole debate around retrofit hope chests and novelty, what's one way to pen future cityscapes? I'd wager green foundations are a solid prologue. It's not just pulled from thin air eco-babble. This stuff is concrete. Except, sometimes, well, it's literally not concrete. It's bamboo or recycled plastics, swapping the old-school bricks and mortar for something that gives Mother Earth some breathing room. What's your hot take on playing Lego with sustainable tidbits?
Bet, Joe. It's like Mother Earth went on one of those home makeover shows and said, let's jazz it up. I want a bamboo living room. Next thing you know, we're decking out cities in repurposed yoga mats and mushroom insulation. Saving the planet or prepping for an alien visit with funky materials? Who knows? But either way, eco-friendly is getting a wild glow-up.
Hang on a sec. While it's kind of flashy to talk about decking out cities in bamboo and fungi, I gotta toss in a hefty butt here. What about the actual doability? Sure, eco-friendly materials are getting the limelight, but can they really hold up the roof? Let's break down bamboo. Super strong, grows like a weed, it's like nature's rebar. But should we go full panda diet on our city plans? Are these funky green mats just flash in the pan, or are we watching the new guard of building blocks kick the old concrete curbside? Talking about mycelium insulation, yeah, that's mushroom stuff, right? It's like the natural world's foam spray. Does great with the R value check, helping us dial down the energy meters. But what are we missing here? We're enamored with these sustainable sirens. Sure, they look good on paper, sing sweet for the carbon footprint song, but let's really chew over this. Will they stand the test of time and code inspectors with their clipboards? Real-world applications. That's where the rubber meets the road, or like where the bamboo meets the cityscape. Listeners, what do you think? Got any intel on how this stuff is holding up in the wild? Let's dig into this going green without envy dream.
Hey, reality check. It's time to wrap this up. Big shout out to all you incredible listeners tuning in. Without you, we'd just be two dudes talking to a wall. Don't forget, get your daily dose of chaos and chuckles tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern. You know the drill. Till then, keep those foundations sturdy, green or not, and stay awesome. Peace out.